Hello everyone, Fluffy Waffles 69 here guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we will be concluding our Down the Line series on the UK light cruisers, finally arriving at the tier 10 Minotaur. Guys, this is a ship that I absolutely adore. I find her super fun and incredibly impactful, almost timeless too, if you may. But I will be the first one to acknowledge, no matter how you set up this particular ship, this ship is not easy to play at all. No matter if you're deciding to take smoke, if you take the legendary smoke, if you slot radar, I still think this ship has got to be one of the hardest light cruisers to play in the game. Now, a little backstory about this particular vessel. This ship was the first, I believe, light cruiser line to be added to the game. So you had ships like the Des Moines, the Zau, the Hindenburg, the Moskva, and then I believe was it this ship that added? Maybe not necessarily in that order. And you actually got 152s at tier 10 with no high explosive. So it threw a lot of people off like a little bit for a loop there. But once they figured out kind of the idea of what the Minotaur tried to do and what it tried to accomplish, this ship became a fan favorite immediately. Now, the Minotaur is quite interesting for a ship. Obviously, I've already covered the Brisbane, which is basically the sister ship to the Mino over there for the Commonwealth. And you already know, if you've watched that review, just how much I love and adore that particular ship. The Minotaur I do love as well. Of course, my love is going to go a little bit more towards the Brisbane. I just really like that. And of course, having the ability to have high explosive is always quite nice. But in order to pick up that plus the 12-kilometer radar, there are going to be some trade-offs. Basically, the big one is DPM. You are losing considerable amounts of DPM that the Mino has, which is insane. I think when we all think of like the go-to DPM light cruiser, I think one of our first thoughts is probably the Minotaur. Now again, if you are new to this Down the Line series and you are catching a glimpse here at the tier 10, I do highly recommend you go to the playlist that I have provided on my channel and go back and watch the previous ships starting at the tier 5 Emerald, and eventually we work our way down here to, work our way down here towards the Minotaur. Now the reason for that is because each particular ship in this line builds upon the foundation that was set around the Emerald, and that's why I usually start at tier 5, because I think tier 5's like basically when the lines really start to get their identity of what they're going to be able to do and accomplish. So definitely go back, check out those later videos, then work your way down here to the Minotaur, or Minotaur, whatever, and it'll make a little bit more sense about a lot of the stuff I am trying to say. Now, obviously, as the last little disclaimer here, the Minotaur is not a new ship. This ship has been around in the game for quite some time. So a lot of the stuff, when you probably click this video or see this video, you're like, Waffle, you're going to tell me nothing new or nothing that I already don't know about the Minotaur. And yeah, you're probably right. But again, some of us aren't here, some of us haven't been here for 9-10 years. Some of us are newer to the game. Some of us haven't grinded down the Minotaur. Some of us don't even have a tier 10. And I think that is what these videos are trying to be. For us more senior players, we can give comments or, leave comments down in the comment section and talk about our experience with the Mino, either playing her or facing against her. And then for newer players to go ahead, potentially ask questions and watch this video to kind of learn more about what this ship can do in battle. That is what these videos try to do. They really try to paint the picture for you guys there at home or on your tablet or on your smartphone or whatever it is, so kind of learn a little bit from it and again have this discussion. It's what this channel has always been about, is having opinions, talking about her, and then basically relaying those opinions to one another, and hopefully someone can go out there and say, I'm going to try this, I'm going to go out and use John Doe's build and what he says to do, and then, oh, sure enough, it actually works, so I like it, right? That's kind of what these videos are trying to be. So like I always do, I start with a port analysis, of the ship. Then I will go ahead and show gameplay on the ship, talking about tips and tricks I found or what I utilized while playing the vessels. And then I'll give you my final thoughts. Now, again, the Minotaur, because it has two potential builds, I'm not going to cover too much of the legendary mod. I will save that for a separate video, but I will cover the radar variant of the ship, and I will cover the smokescreen variant of the ship for you guys, so you kind of see how it changes just ever so slightly about the playstyle of the ship. So this is going to be a longer video. I do apologize. There will be timestamps or chapters down below, so feel free to skip ahead if you want to, see something, something particular in this video. I'll go ahead and make sure that is crystal clear. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get into the port analysis section of the video, and starting off with the armor layout that we always do. Again, just like that of the Neptune, you are seeing a lot of green of 16mm plating on the nose, the ass, the deck. Basically, the ship is, I would say, almost 75% green, okay? No, your eyes do not deceive you. That is correct. That is 16mm of effective armor on the nose and ass. And what does that mean? That means gun calibers, I believe, of 230-ish or higher can actually go straight through your nose and your ass and citadel you. So you have to be careful when you are playing these ships. Just understand, you have to have a lot of game knowledge to know who you're engaged with and who's firing at you, to know if they can overmatch you. Regardless, you should be angling, and the reason for that is because you actually have enough citadel plating, 101mm, matter of fact, that is more than enough to go ahead and fuse and fully arm AP shells from 152s, even some destroyer calibers like Kleber's at 139s. Like, you can get punished by pretty much anyone and everyone in this game. Now, again, you'll be dealing out the pain on their end as well, on your end, sorry, to them, but again, you have to tread with caution, because if you show way too much broadside, if larger caliber armor piercing, they just don't give an F. They're gonna they basically citadel you into oblivion. So you have to be careful and pick your engagements wisely, and still honor the guns that whoever's shooting at you. Okay, if we strip away some armor layers, we will see that we have a absolutely massive citadel here on the Mino. And again, your eyes do not deceive you as well. We carry over that step citadel that the Neptune has, which is quite an Achilles heel for these particular vessels. So you're going to have to be careful of that too. Basically, this is increasing the likelihood of you eating citadels through the nose, as you can see if this is the profile that the enemy ships are seeing. Yeah, it shouldn't be too incredibly hard to go right through that 16mm plating and then potentially go through 127mm or 127mm here, or even 57mm on the deck. Not hard at all to punish, and that is the Mino in a nutshell when it comes to its armor layout. If we look at the survivability of the Mino, 43,300 with 13% torpedo reduction or damage reduction. Again, we don't want to be eating torpedoes, but we do have 13%, so that's mainly going to be utilized towards the aerial torpedoes that most likely will be dropped. One thing to keep in mind that I always thought was funny was when they nerfed the Zao, and the Zao had less HP than that of the Mino. It was always quite funny to see that. But again, obviously, thank God things have changed, and Wargaming finally woke up and made that change back to the Zao, which is nice. But yeah, that was always a fun thing that we always like to tease about, was the Zao having just under the HP, and then they buffing it just over, and then finally we're at a better spot with the Zao. But anyways, I digress. Moving into the artillery of the Mino, and we have this weird sort of turret arrangement of the 5x2 152s. As you can see on the vessel, we have 3 mounted on the forward end of the ship, and we have 2 mounted on the rear end of the ship. They are, with the build that I am running, 2.8 second reload on these turrets with a 5.4 second turret traverse base. Okay, this is incredible, and I think this is one of the reasons why this line was just so popular and why it still is so damn popular. These guns, it doesn't even feel like it's human. It just is like a robot to some degree, ripping around on your deck to have these guns pointed at the target. It's really quite incredible, and their DPM on this thing is absolutely insane. Can melt ships if they do not respect the gun power that is the Mino. You have a maximum range of 15.8 kilometers as well. I'm not going to go too much into the dispersion value. You already know how I feel about double-barreled gun turrets, and that is quite the case here on the Minotaur. The guns do feel rather inaccurate, but again, who really gives a crap? You're firing out, 2.8 second reload on 10 guns. I mean, it really shouldn't be that big of a deal, guys, right? Going into the armor piercing, and this is the short fused armor piercing. Again, if you don't know what that means, I will refresh your memory here just a little bit. What short fuse basically means is that less armor needs to be penetrated in order for that shell to fully detonate and fuse, which makes it absolutely lethal towards lightly armored targets such as light cruisers, kind of cruisers in general, and especially those destroyers. My god, what this thing can do to enemy destroyers is criminal. Maximum damage is 3,200 with initial velocity of 768 meters a second. Now, I will be the first one to acknowledge that the shells on the Mino are quite floaty. But again, let's take a negative and turn it into a positive. Absolutely, you don't want to be open water gunboating in your Mino. Are there going to be times that has to happen? Yes. Again, you have to read the map and the scenario, what happens. It's going to happen. But the ability for you to launch your shells over islands and still hit targets and absolutely rain a barrage of armor piercing onto their deck is very possible and will most likely be done by you in game because of this floatier shell velocity. You know, a lot of people bitch about the floatier shells in general for a lot of cruisers and even some battleships, right, and some destroyers. But again, if we can somehow realize, okay, so either I need to get closer to the targets, which the Mino is one of those, like, let's be careful about getting too close, or can I position my ships around islands or utilizing my smoke screen to use this and turn this kind of into a positive. That's kind of how I look at it when it comes to floatier shells, and it's definitely one of those things on the Mino you can 100% make work and is incredibly effective at doing that. This can deter enemies from pushing, this can frustrate enemies to basically quicken their shots and try to blind fire you and waste salvos on you when there's clearly a visible target they could shoot instead. So again, we want to make sure that we are non-stop shooting our guns in this thing. Of course, we have to know the scenarios that are present while we're doing this, but again, for the vast majority of us, we should know how to read the mini-map, read the play of battle, and again, plan our maneuvers accordingly. Going into the torpedoes, and just like the Neptune guys, we have a very strong torpedo suite. I think the second, one of the higher torpedo DPMs on a cruiser. With the 4x4 533 millimeter launchers, as you can see here, they are deck mounted, so they have an increased likelihood of getting knocked out at times because they don't have any armor protection or coverage over top of them. 96-second reload on these, 10-kilometer range, around 16,700 maximum damage with a speed of 62 knots and a detectability range of 1.3 kilometers is not bad at all. And again, because these are Royal Navy torpedoes, remember that they can be launched single launch and narrow spread. They don't have a widespread option, which is actually very nice. In my opinion, I think the widespread option in pretty much all situations are pretty much useless. But again, there are some situations, I guess, that it's not a terrible idea. But again, you don't even get the idea or the chance to go ahead and do that with the Mino. It's only narrow and single launched spread torpedoes, guys. Going into the depth charges. Now, again, we've talked about this. I think this is a really big weakness for the Mino that doesn't have ASW, and this is a trait that is inherent to the whole entire line, and it doesn't change. That being said, Royal Navy depth charge damage is absolutely no joke at 5k a pop. Sure, you have 2 charges, you only have 4 bombs in a charge, so 8 total bombs that can be dropped in like, what, 5 seconds or so. They can do catastrophic damage to subs, but the likelihood of you sailing your 32, 33 knot cruiser over a submarine that's most likely traveling over 20 knots underwater and can keep you lit at periscope depth is unlikely. You will probably get blapped by another ship because that's really what's going to kill you. It's not even the sub itself, it's the spotting that the sub will do to you that other ships like battleships will be licking their chops waiting to fire salvos into you and inevitably score massive citadel ribbons or just catastrophic damage to you. And again, you'll probably bitch at the enemy submarine for doing that, but again, I don't necessarily blame the sub because he's kind of shit out of luck, right? So the only way you're really going to kill a sub in the Mino is if the sub overextends severely or criminally misplays a situation and gets greedy. That's essentially how you're going to kill a submarine. So again, you're definitely not a submarine hunter, but you have the ability to nuke subs pretty much in a single bomb drop. If you position your ship accordingly and drop them when it needs to be dropped over an enemy submarine that is overextended. Going into AA defense. Now, the Mino's AA is actually quite legit. Just like that of the Neptune, we actually acquired this 6.9 dual-purpose AA range because these 152mm guns act as dual-purpose AA mounts, which are very, very nice. 414 continuous damage on this with 6 flak on the Mino. Now, there are a couple things here that make the Mino's AA feel weaker than it actually is. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say the Mino's AA is a no-fly zone. That was back in the day, and those days are long gone. The Mino's AA is good AA, and it will definitely do wonders against enemy aircraft carriers that aren't the most skilled and don't have the highest levels of commanders. That's a fact, okay? Dodging flak is pretty much going to be a staple for aircraft carriers in order to increase their survivability and minimize their plane losses. The only difference here with the Minotaur's AA is you cannot supplement with defensive AA fire to give you that extra little boost in regards to shredding the enemy aircraft. And I think the flak count on the Minotaur is outrageously, grossly represented and needs to be increased, in my opinion. I would love to see the Minotaur's AA buffed by at least a couple flak because, in my opinion, I mean, look at this damn thing with these AA mounts on the ship. I mean, this is a scary ship. And again, we go up to the super ship, the Edgar, and the AA is absolutely lethal. But again, the Minotaur's AA for me feels a little bit underwhelming tier for tier, especially at tier 10, and I feel like it should be able to do a little bit more than it does, which is rather frustrating for me, but I digress. Moving into the maneuverability, 33.5 knots is a top speed, a turning circle radius of 750 meters, and a rudder shift time of 8.3 seconds. Now remember, we have that baked in acceleration on the Mino from start to stop. Plus 50% is already baked in, so it's a no-brainer. You're going to slot rudder shift in that fourth slot to get us down to 8.3 seconds, which again is not bad. This ship will accelerate into its turns and drift on the ocean essentially, which is quite nice. But I do warn you that it is one of those things you have to learn to get used to, that improved acceleration on this ship, because I have seen multiple Minotaurs accelerate out of their smoke screen when they didn't mean to, or accelerate around an island and they're basically dead in the water to enemy ship that wants to shoot the Minotaur citadel, which they will most likely be able to do. So you have to be careful when utilizing the Minotaur in that regard. And then lastly, we come into the concealment. Again, we take the concealment mod in the 5th slot to get us down to 10.1. We go ahead and slot the commander to get us down to, I believe, is it 9.5? Nope, it's 9 kilometers exactly, which is quite nice. And then we go ahead and look at the smoke firing penalty, which again is 5.4 kilometers, which again is pretty nice. It gives you a 400 meter gap between your smoke firing penalty and before your hydroacoustic search can pick up what is spotting you. And again, I'll talk more about the whole smoke screen thing here in a little bit while we get into battle, but I pretty much just want us to hit the stats here in port real quick. Going into the upgrades, and again, I will go over these real quick here for you. The main armaments modification 1 is a no-brainer in the first slot. In the second slot, I am picking up hydroacoustic search modification 1. Now, the reason I am doing this is because I play smoke Mino and I play radar Mino. I don't really just selectively choose one. If you are one of those players that will selectively just play radar Mino, then 100% get the surveillance radar modification 1 to increase the duration of plus 20%. That's a no-brainer. But if you switch back and forth between smoke and radar, then why not just stick with the hydroacoustic search modification 1, because that is locked in that third consumable slot. You can't not take the hydroacoustic search mod. So definitely, that's what I would recommend. And again, it's applicable in every game. There's never not going to be a game that you don't need to utilize or shouldn't have to utilize your hydroacoustic search. Again, the same thing goes in the third slot for the smoke generator. If you selectively just play a smoke Mino, there you go. It's right there. And I would 100% take that over the aiming systems, because there's a commander skill you can take, like Outnumbered, that can help compensate for that. Plus, you're firing at 2.8 seconds. I don't really think accuracy is that big of a deal on a floaty or shellarchy kind of ship that pumps out the DPM that the Minotaur pumps out. Now, again, if you're kind of on the fence between the two, utilize both, not just one selectively, then aiming systems modification 1 is the mod you need to be taking. In the fourth slot, steering gears, mod 1, no-brainer. In the fifth slot, concealment systems modification 1, no-brainer. And again, in the sixth slot, main battery modification 3 is a no-brainer to make sure we get that insanely high DPM at 2.8 seconds of reload. Now, in the fifth slot, I want to talk about the legendary mod here real quick, which is the aerosol smoke curtain system. Okay, basically what this does for the Mino is turns it into a how would I describe this? Basically a crawling smoke generator that lasts an incredibly long time. Okay, your detectability range it only goes down by 5, not by 10. So you go around 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, around that detection of consumable, which again is perfectly fine. Plus 300% smoke generator consumable action time. So that's going to be how long it's actually pumping the smoke and laying the smoke screen for you. Ship consumable preparation time and reload is -10. Again, that's to all consumables on the ship, which is quite nice. But again, at the cost of your smoke screen dispersion time only lasting, it's lasting 20% less than it would normally last. Basically, it turns it into a crawling smoke generator, and then you can lay an absolute frickin' Siegfried Maginot line of smoke for your allies and yourself. It's really an interesting legendary mod that I have utilized and is super fun, especially when you take this and you compound it with the smoke generator modification 1 to kind of get rid of that penalty essentially for you. My only thing to this, to the aerosol smoke curtain system, for clan battles, this is a pretty damn nice consumable to utilize for you and your allies. And every now and then in the random scene, it's not terrible either. I don't find this to be particularly useful in ranked. And the big reason why I don't think you see this utilized a whole hell of a lot is because radar is just so prevalent or relevant in the game nowadays, and it's just so common, and that just neuters your aerosol smoke curtain system. So again, matchmaker dependent, position dependent. It really depends. Again, smoke screens can be countered and have been countered for a while now. Are they still useful? Absolutely. You can make them work, right? I mean, just look at when the Yorktown or Essex drops smoke for people, right? It's lethal. But again, just because you can dump a shit ton of smoke and you think, oh wow, now I'm concealed in my smoke screen. Well, there's two things you have to remember. One, radar exists. And two, you're a massive light cruiser that has a huge citadel, and your DPM and your shell tracers can be easily tracked because your DPM is so high that battleships and cruisers will just blind fire your smoke screen. And more often than not, they'll score citadel ribbons if you're not careful, especially if you're not moving in your smoke, not angled, that sort of stuff. So you have to be careful. It's kind of a double-edged sword there. But I figured I'd cover this, give you my opinion about it. But again, I'm not going to play this now and talk about this too much now in depth because I will save this for a later video. Going over the commander build. Now, I want you to be understanding. I will show 3 separate commander builds for you guys that I have utilized. And right now, the one that I've been utilizing that got me a lot of success in this game is the one you see on your screen currently that I utilize. First of all, 21-point commander. I actually have a 21-point commander. I love this ship. This is what I utilize, okay? Is this the right commander build? I don't know. Probably not. But again, it works for me. And I think that's what's most important. Whatever works for you, I think is the commander build you should try, okay? Is this the one I would recommend for you to utilize? How about I just show the other 2 later on, and then you can come to the conclusion of which one works best for you. I would say if you want kind of like the jack of all trades Mino that kind of is good in almost all situations, this is probably the one that I would recommend. There are other builds that are going to help you utilizing outnumbered, maybe survivability expert, what is this skill right here? The consumable specialist skill. Like there's different ones that can help benefit you a little bit more. But again, because I have Bert Denkirk on this ship and he has those improved commander skills, that's why I'm utilizing. Like, do you need grease the gears on the Mino? Absolutely not. Basically, I went from 5.8 to 4.5. You don't really need that. Is it nice? Yeah, it's hilarious to see my turrets turn like a tornado on my ship, but you don't necessarily need that, okay? Because the turrets turn very fast as is, right? But again, the AA skills, because I want to help supplement my AA battery, which I find to not be as strong as it should be on the Mino, I go ahead and take this. And again, the 4-point AA skill with the ship's consumable preparation and reload time is -50% while your AA guns are active, has helped me get out of a lot of sticky situations. So again, with the ASW that's being dropped by ships to see your shell tracers, from planes, from hybrids, all that stuff, this ship, because it's in the thick of it with the 6.9 kilometer range AA, it really helps this thing utilize its AA more, so it gets that passive bonus, which is or not passive, well, it gets that activation bonus of the AA defense and ASW expert skill, which again is very nice. And again, because we're using the ASWs, like that skill, you actually get a bonus to your ASW, which is again insane. Like it doesn't really need that, but it's nice to have. So Anyways, guys, that is the Minotaur in a nutshell here for the port analysis. Now, I do have 2 games to show you. So again, strap in. It's going to be a long one. If you have to like pause, go watch other videos, go have a life, and then come back to this video later, I completely understand. But again, there are specific points that I want to cover while we talk about both potential play styles of this ship. So without further ado, let's go on into the first game, guys, shall we? Okay, and here we are in battle with our Minotaur. This is the first of 2 battles I have to show you. This is the utilization of the radar consumable game that I have to play with you, or to show you guys, excuse me. And again, you're probably noticing there's no audio in the background, no game audio in the background. I do apologize for that. It's just something got messed up with the recording, but that's okay. Now you have my beautiful voice you can listen to while you try to watch the game in the background and try to understand what I am saying, kind of my thoughts, my tips, my tricks that I have for you guys when you play the Radar Mino. Now, as you know, a big strength of playing the radar Mino is that you have the ability to stealth radar. Now, what does that mean? That means basically, since my radar range is 10 kilometers, my detection's actually underneath that. So basically, when my ship gets detected, I can immediately pop my U key or my radar key, and I can see basically who is spotting me in return. So I can basically counter spot the enemy ship that is spotting my ship, essentially. I'm sure you all know that by now. Now, there are a handful of ships that can do this, and the Minotaur being one of them. Now, again, I think the Edinburgh had the ability to do this. The Baltimore has the ability to do this. And there's a couple other ships, again, that I can't really remember off the top of my head. I think the Italian is another ship, which it's very strong, right, in the Brisbane. Very strong tool. A lot of people don't like it, and I'm kind of on the fence about it as well. I don't think it necessarily leads to a healthy, balance for the game, given the fact that, basically the destroyer is just trying to do what it always does, which is move up, spot, contest caps, and then basically when he gets spotted, then he's basically effed because my DPM is so insane. My short fuse AP will absolutely chew him up and basically punish him for just trying to do his job. So it's one of those things that it's like, I don't really know where I fall in regards of if I like this or if I don't. I mean, I guess I like it because I play the ship, but I guess I can also understand from a game balancing decision that it's probably not a good thing, okay? So what do I like to do in my Mino? Well, usually I like to utilize island coverage, and I like to put myself between an island and a capture point, but always have an ability to exit and turn out and run away. I think one big thing I see with Minotaur commanders is they definitely get the part down, which is the easy part, which is sailing towards the cap, waiting till they get spotted, and then counter spotting whatever is detecting them. But they don't necessarily have a contingency plan on how to survive and leave the the area, right, essentially, right? Because I feel like a lot of Minotaur players go in, they do a little bit of damage, usually don't kill the destroyer, and they get absolutely blapped in return, which is rather frustrating because that's a tier 10 high DPM light cruiser that is now dead on your team. It's no surprise that the Minotaur holds the distinction for probably the single most shot after ship by all battleships and cruisers in the game, because again, you are a giant floating glass canoe that will get nuked by anyone and everyone. So you have to be careful, know and read the situation accordingly, and know the flank you spawn in on the map, because you need to make sure you have an exit strategy as well. Because more often than not, when you radar an enemy destroyer in your Mino, that DD is going to do a full gamer turn and just try to rip the band-aid off and get the hell out of there like this Shimakaze is doing. And then plus we have the hybrid spotting him as well, which again is what I highly recommend you to do as a hybrid ship. And it's going to keep him spotted and force him to essentially disengage. Again, my positioning is kind of weird because the way the enemy team's, I guess, positioning or loadout went with their battleships and cruisers and their destroyers. So I kind of am forced in a situation that I don't really want to be in. Again, we're off detection, but the element of surprise is now blown for me. Once you utilize your radar once, it's pretty much well known that the enemy knows, as long as they're communicating, knows that you're a radar mino and they have to tread with caution, especially enemy destroyers. Again, I will catch an enemy destroyer with his pants down later on in the game, but by the time I do that, the game is pretty much looking grim anyways, and it's too little too late. It's one of those things too that the Mino is easily countered by pretty much any ship that can catch it out in the in open ocean like this. And it's nothing. It has nothing to do with the amount of like fire that this thing can put down range. It has everything to do with how much damage it can sustain and take. Again, you know this thing is a massive citadel. Yes, it has an improved repair party, so like the specialized repair teams, and you can heal back, I believe, 40% of all damage, which is quite nice. That's probably one of the best heals in the game for a cruiser, if not the best. But at the same time, if you're under a constant barrage of enemy fire, this thing cannot take a beating and cannot take sustained conflict for too long. You have to have the ability to disengage, and I think that's why the smoke screen generator is just renowned as easier and better to play with, because it's more comfortable for a lot of players to have this. Instead of relying on island coverage for you to dip on and off, you can now pretty much just fabricate and create your own coverage and concealment, which again is quite nice. Open water gunboating in the Mino does not feel comfortable, and I think it has to do with not only the platform, but also because you don't have high explosives, so you can't set fires. You only have the short fused armor piercing, so you're relying on getting those superstructure hits like this Montana coming nose in at me. I have to specifically land on his superstructure to do anything, like any remotely amounts of like reasonable amounts of damage, and if I'm not, I'm just getting shatters or ricochets. And again, it's one of those things. Yes, I know I reload super quickly, but again, it's one of those things that it just feels not the best because it's not a good scenario to be in like this. But again, I'm forced. I'm thinking, hey, maybe the Shimakaze will push back into me. Of course, we saw he pushed towards the middle of the map because he wants nothing to do with the radar miner, which is probably the smart decision. So then I'm forced into doing a role that I don't really want to do, which again, kudos for them. It's kind of making my ship not irrelevant, but a little bit more irrelevant because the amount of damage I'm actually helping my team do right now is not the most. Okay, if you kind of understand what I'm trying to say, essentially. Now, moving into the next thing I want to talk about with the Minotaur, and it's actually more or less the commander builds that I have for this particular ship. Now, as you recall from the port analysis, I said I have 3. I've already showcased you the one that I am utilizing in both replays. It is my go-to Minotaur captain build because I feel it checks the most amount of boxes for me personally. But I will go ahead and showcase you guys the next 2 right here. Both these builds I have personally utilized and actually quite enjoy them. I will say that very similar to what I'm currently using on the ship anyways, there's literally just 1 or 2, maybe 3 different skills that I am taking and allocating my points to. I will say utilizing the outnumbered skill on the Mino does feel really good, and it's one of those commander skills that has actually grown on me since the beginning. I think when it first got announced, that commander skill, I'm looking at this and I'm like, the only way to trigger this is if I throw my ship in bad situations. But what I didn't account for is, more often than not, you'd be surprised how many bad situations you find yourself in game, and especially when it comes down to how many enemies are within your maximum firing range than allies, you actually proc that skill. Because of the way the maps are designed, because of how players are in this game, you'll actually be proccing that skill more so than you think. Now again, because you only have 15.8 kilometer maximum main battery firing range, I feel the shorter ranged cruisers actually benefit from this more than the longer ranges. Again, I could be wrong here, but I feel like I proc it more so because it's shorter range and I'm having to put myself further up into the map more often than not where the vast majority of the enemy ships are. So I actually proc that skill a lot. And again, not to switch topics too incredibly quickly, but here is the footage in the background of me catching a DD with his pants down with the radar. And again, the Lucian, scary ass DD, right? But again, he fails in comparison with the enemy, or with the Mino here with the short fuse AP. I'm just doing absolutely deadly things to this guy, and he pretty much is wiped out of the face of existence because of the power of the DPM of what this ship has. Now again, here we move into a brawling situation with 9 460 millimeter guns, and I'm like, please don't have your guns trained on me. Sure as shit he does, and I know I'm gonna be in one, so I preemptively launch my torpedoes. I feel he's gonna turn in and slow down in order to basically respect my guns, and basically at this point it's just a dice roll. I have to utilize my turning, my healing, my rudder shift, all that stuff, and the engine juking in order to throw off as much amount of his potential, damage that he's going to be doing to me, inflicting me. If I just go nose into this guy, there's a way easier chance for him to absolutely obliterate me through my nose than if I'm actively maneuvering or swiveling left to right. And again, I know he's right there. I know he's going to be shooting at me. Hopefully I get a little torpedo. All I need basically is to land a couple torpedoes and survive one more salvo. Do I? I do. And again, with my heal, I'm able to heal back enough where, again, even eating another citadel still allows me to win this guy and beat this guy in an engagement, which is quite nice. Now, honestly, it's one of those things, well, if I was going against another battleship, would it have turned out that way? Because I'm fighting a Yamato. I'm not as scared of a Yamato as I should be. I think that's one ship that could use some love. I talked about that in my legendary module upgrade or overview video. But again, if it was in Ohio, probably a different story because the accuracy is better. Now, again, I don't know if that guy was particularly utilizing the Yamato legendary mod. I can only imagine that if he were to, it could have been a different story with me still surviving this that engagement, essentially, right? So obviously our black is AFK all game, so I went ahead and reported him. It happens. It's like the one way I really actually report people if they're AFK. If you know, right? So, but anyways, yeah, guys, so you see the radar is very nice, but it's one of those things that it's like when I take radar into battle, somewhere on the course of the battle, I'm like, well, damn it, I wish I had a smoke screen. But then when I take my smoke screen, I find myself in situations where I'm like, damn it, I wish I had my radar. You're never going to be 100% satisfied with anything, but the one thing I can tell you is that other than one map in this game, there are things called islands. And islands can act as concealment and ways for you to dip on and off it so you can lob your shells over and behind from. You can't, like, if you don't slot radar, there's no way for you to spot enemy ships unless an ally has radar, you have an aircraft carrier spotting for you, or you have a destroyer doing his job. And again, it's one of those things you just can't rely on your teammates to do that for you and check those boxes. So I think that's why the argument of radar is just more applicable and useful in more situations is true, in my opinion. I think if you're going to have and you're going to want the most amount of game impact in your Mino, I would highly recommend you just take the radar modification into battle. But again, it's an acquired taste, and you have to learn to play the Mino, I think, with smoke first before you even attempt to just go head first and dive in with the radar. All about positioning, how the ship handles, your gun firing angles, all these things have to be known by you before you can really make the radar work for you, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. It's one of those things, right? As we wind down here towards the end of the battle, you're going to see that there's just no way in hell we can win this. But I will say it does come in close, because if our ally in the Tempest Nera doesn't or didn't die to the Shimakaze torpedo wall of skill, there actually could have been an argument that the battle would have been closer. In hindsight, probably still not. But again, based upon what you're going to see here in the next minute, you could argue like, there is a chance that you guys could have come back and won this game. But again, it's probably not going to happen, is basically what I'm trying to tell you. So we're just basically going to try to contest this capture point, and we're going to have to sail in. Even if I have to go head on against a Colombo, I will do so, though it's pretty unlikely that I'll survive that. But he is spotted. I think our Tempest Nera slaps him for us a little bit here, which actually allows us to get the advantage, so that now with our insane DPM that we're lobbing, even when he essentially is behind that island and gets himself out of the line of fire, my lobby ash shells are still in air coming down to hit his ship, which actually, funny enough, we take him out, which is awesome. And now I'm like, well, you're saying there's a chance, sort of thing. Again, the Lepanto schwacks me with his sap. Shocker. My heel's already procced. And again, I'm going to come over here and I'm like, okay, there's no way he's going to sail out. I'm just going to launch my torpedoes because I know he's going to come in. Single launch torpedoes, I might add, because I want to pinpoint the likelihood of my ship landing, or my torpedoes landing on target. Now, again, if the Tempest Nera didn't die, I have 30 seconds to go and kill this guy. I am fully confident that I would have been able to do so. But again, he goes down. just a little shy of being able to do that and pull off that comeback for us. All right, off to battle number 2, and now thank God we have audio in the background, so that's nice. That creates a little bit more of a lifelike atmosphere for us, something we're familiar with. And again, hearing these absolute machine guns go off is kind of comical at times. I highly recommend, if you are farming in this thing, stick with the ripple fire mode. It's just, I feel like you're going to be able to land more and you have to worry about less. If you are finding yourself in tight situations, or if you are worried about people potentially looking at your ship in your smoke screen, using the double click on the mouse to fire a full salvo isn't a bad idea either, because it's harder to track your shell tracers if you do that compared to if you're doing ripple fire like I'm doing here currently. Again, now we have smoke, okay? So what does that mean? That basically means I'm not beholden to map coverage in order to conceal my vessel at times, but now I'm trading that ability in order to no longer be able to spot enemy ships that are either detecting me or concealed themselves. It's one of those things I've already talked about. I think if you are wanting to have a little bit more solo carry ability, I think the radar is going to be the safer option. Or sorry, I think radar is not the safer option, my bad. I think radar is just going to be the stronger option. The safer option is probably to go with the smoke screen, as it allows you to farm freely, in air quotes, from your smoke screen. Of course, freely isn't necessarily true, because you still can get blind fired and people can track your shell tracers and still hit you for fairly hard, if not dev strike you if they're really good at blind firing with the spotter aircraft in the sky train or trick. So one thing I want to talk about with the smoke ability and what I do with the smoke screen is I still come up, and no matter what, I still want to position myself around islands, because again, your smoke doesn't last forever, and when that smoke falls, if I'm still find myself in ability in a good position where I can farm from, I can then pull back behind my island that I'm utilizing still, and I can still utilize that island, and I don't have to worry about ships seeing me, and I can still break line of sight. I've talked about this in immense amount of detail on my channel. If you can put yourself in situations where you can fire freely from behind island coverage and reliably land shells on the target, that is well traded HP, because you're not trading anything. It's a one-sided engagement, and it is good. Of course, the only thing like counter to that is make sure you have adequate spotting. If you don't have spotting, well, then it's going to be tough to do that, right? Now, obviously, one thing I didn't point out is I am in a division this game, and I was in a division last game. Sorry, guys. I played this to get footage, and I played with a couple of my buddies that texted me that they said they wanted to hop on. It's not a big deal. I just make sure I wanted to point that out. I should have pointed that out a little earlier, but again, the division does change a little bit of the play style. So you can see that in the previous game, I had a Des Moines and was it a guy in the Libertad? Like, again, the Des Moines had the radar. Did I really need to bring the radar? No. But I figured it was better for me to bring, we had the dual threat, a double threat of the radar, than utilizing the smoke screen. Now, in this game, or this particular battle, I decided to bring the smoke screen because I have a Kremlin who can tank and basically is going to be passively spotting through getting shot at. And I have the Louisiana, which can do the same thing, plus have the aircraft to fly over and spot the DDs depending on where they're at, as long as they're outside of smoke. So that was my sort of thought process, and you're going to see just how effective it can be. I think the Minotaur is like the staple support light cruiser. Now, there always comes this argument of, well, what is better for support, the Mino or the Worcester? And this is my honest opinion, okay? I think the Minotaur is scarier to a lot of ships. It is, right? I think even to destroyers, it's incredibly scary. But I think when it comes to all-around team utility, I think the Worcester has got it beat. But again, this begs the question. Why would you play a Worcester anymore when the Hawaii exists? I don't really see anything out of the ordinary when I'm playing, you know, like, what would I play instead of the Mino if I want to do this sort of play style like that I'm looking for? There's really nothing else that offers this sort of play style, which creates kind of this timeless, you know, sort of experience that you can all play still and go back to constantly and play. And that's what I really like about the Mino. There really isn't another ship out there that's going to, you know, scratch this particular itch that the Mino can do. Where the Worcester, I think there's not only the Hawaii, but there's also a couple other options that are similar to the HE spamming role that you can utilize as well. So again, it's just one of those things. Again, I love the Worcester, but it's one of those things that I find that the Worcester is not in the best sort of spot right now because the Hawaii exists, and I really hope that Wargaming addresses the Hawaii issue, because the Hawaii is just, there's not enough trade-offs, let's just put it that way, with the Hawaii, and it's way too strong. Okay, now coming back to the Minotaur, something that I haven't really talked about with the Mino. So I talked about the radar, I talked about the smoke. How about the overall DPM on the Minotaur? On the top left portion of the screen here, I will put up an image of like all the light cruisers at tier 10, or the light cruisers that I chose, like effective DPM numbers. And this is only recording to basically the AP DPM of the ships. And you can see that there's a lot of respective AP DPM numbers that are really quite good. The Minotaur coming in at 600,000 AP DPM, but it just gets slowly edged out by the Colbert at 734,000 AP DPM, which again, when I see Colbert players not utilizing the AP on that thing, it is just like, I kind of want to like face palm. But you can see the Minotaur's AP DPM, 600,000. That is incredible. And again, it's one of those things you really want to make use of. Plus the short fused ability, like even just utilizing my rear 2 turrets is still enough to go ahead and eliminate the ZF6, who just slightly gets detected there, and I'm able to punish him considerably. Now again, sadly, I did not catch this before. I did not look at my minimap. I'm too busy farming on the enemy push that's coming in towards the A cap there. But the enemy Kunming comes flying right up the cock and basically nukes my ally from the rear, which is rather sad, because that Kremlin was basically one of the only things stopping and preventing the enemy BBs from pushing. We are able to take down the Super DD, which again is a massive threat to all my BBs, including myself too, to all of us essentially. But thank God we were able to get him out of the picture. Now again, one of these things you have to be careful of too that I've noticed is enemy spotter planes, once they are popped, do travel fairly wide around, like in regards of a radius or diameter around the radius around the ship that they're popped on. And because you have the 6.9 kilometer AA, your AA will actually shoot at that ranges if you're not careful. So you have to be careful because it will detect you for a little bit. And yeah, like you see right here, and thank God we're able to shoot it down, because if his guns were trained on me, I had basically 4 enemy ships ready and waiting to shoot at me, and gave up my position. So they can see that I'm trying to relocate. I used some single launch torpedoes, shoot them around the island, because I figured this guy's trying to get to the island to use it as like a buffer or a little bit of a shield. And sure enough, he goes right into my single launch torpedoes, and we are actually able to take him down. Of course, our ally shoots at him right away too, not a big deal, it's a team game. And we're able to take him down as well. Now, again, the Mino, one of those things that I want to talk about that I haven't really talked about in the port section of the video, and I usually mention this and I forgot to. You could see on the stern of the Mino, and this is a Royal Navy flaw with regards of their engineering or the design of their ships. It has a flat ass, okay? It already has 16 millimeter ass, which basically means 230 millimeter guns or higher can overmatch this. But even if you have 203 millimeter guns, 180 millimeter guns, you can actually put them on that rear and shoot, and it actually will still score Citadel ribbons, which is crazy. So it's because it's a flat armor scheme. There's no curvature to it. It's not bulbous. It's just flat. So it's basically acting as a penetration, which if your shells go and penetrate, they're still going into the ship. Plus the Mino has a step Citadel. You saw this on the Neptune. You can actually go ahead and Citadel the Mino through the rear end, even if your guns technically on paper can't overmatch the Mino. It's one of those things you have to be careful when you're playing the Mino. You can't just go ass into the guy, because they can go ahead and shoot you up the pooper and hit you for catastrophic amounts of damage. But also on the flip side, if you are seeing a Minotaur player do that, go ahead and put your armor piercing right over his rear, and you will actually score Citadel ribbons on the Minotaur. Okay, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I haven't covered yet of the Mino. I covered its consumables with its super heal, its hydroacoustic search, either radar or smoke. I've talked about the absolute insane absurdity of the AP DPM on the ship. I talked about that its AA is good, but it's only good. It could be great. I feel like it needs to get better than it actually is. And that comes down to only having 7 flak, even with a fully spec'd in or built commander build with an AA build. I really would like this thing to have a little bit extra flak. You can, in the 6th slot, take the secondary battery AA mod 3 or whatever that is, and you can actually increase your flak by 2 more, so we go to 7 and 9. I have not personally done that, or if I haven't done it, I haven't done it in a while, so I couldn't give you an opinion if that it's like the final kicker. The only reason I haven't done that is I refuse to give up my DPM that I have on this ship in order to pick up flak, because, or just AA in general, because AA is so subjective. It's not basically every game you're going to get a carrier or a hybrid anyways, even though it seems like it, but you're really not. So I don't feel like I should invest that, you know, over my DPM, which I know I'm going to be utilizing my guns every game, right? It's kind of one of those things. So it's just one of those, you have to be, you know, understand that as much as we have the ability to build an aircraft carrier, like counter CVs and counter in air quotes, you really can't afford to do that, because the Minotaur has AP only, and its only saving grace is its effective DPM. If it doesn't have the DPM, you're probably not going to win a lot of the engagements you're fighting in, unless the enemy is just stupid. And like, as much as we make jokes about a lot of people being bots and all this kind of stuff, like, at the end of the day, for the vast majority of the time, they still shoot their guns and they relatively hit you, especially at closer ranges. So you really can't afford to trade that DPM. I think you lose, what, 16% main battery firing rate, right, at that range. I think it comes out to like 3.2 seconds if you don't take that skill. So I personally wouldn't recommend it. Just my opinion, though, and my opinion alone, but one of those things, right? All right. So now we're getting into the make or break version of the game. I've already pretty much talked about the Mino in extensive amounts of detail. I've talked about the radar, I've talked about the smoke, I've talked about the pros and the cons, I've talked about the massive citadel, I've talked about the improved handling on this ship, how it feels, I've talked about the torpedoes. I've pretty much covered the ship in detail. So I'm going to start my final thoughts about the Minotaur. The Minotaur, in my opinion, is a phenomenal ship. There's no question about the Minotaur's capabilities in the game currently, and I think it's aged actually pretty well. Again, it goes to show you back in the day when Wargaming thought, because this ship, if you don't know, the whole line actually had high explosive, but they thought back in the day having the ability of a smoke screen plus this insanely high rate of fire was just too strong, so they switched it to AP only. It just goes to show you how balancing has changed in this game, what they deem overpowered and strong back in the day, right? Again, the Minotaur, in my opinion, has aged pretty damn well, and it's something I like to call a timeless cruiser. Just like the Des Moines, I really don't see the effectiveness of the Minotaur getting handicapped or power crept any much more than it already has, and it is still a very capable ship if it's in the right hands. I think the Minotaur might be the most like ultimate cruiser when it comes to like gauging your skill as an individual as a cruiser player. And I'm saying that with the smoke screen too. I feel like positioning wise, minimap awareness, target selection, aiming on specific parts of the ship, like all these things encompass like a very strong ability as not only a World of Warships player but as a cruiser player. So I think the Mino really like emphasizes all this and really reflects on the personal skill and awareness of the player who is playing it, if that makes sense. Hopefully I'm not like confusing you with a bunch of fucking jibber jabber, but that's what I'm trying to say. Okay, it's a very, very strong ship, but the problem with the Minotaur that I most commonly see are people are way too aggressive in the Minotaur from the beginning of the battle, and I especially see this with the radar Minos. They just sail in there. They don't give a worry about if they're going to survive or not. As long as they kill the enemy destroyer, they feel, hey, my job is done. I killed the enemy DD. Good luck to the rest of the team. And that's sadly not how it works. You have some tools at your disposal to increase your survivability. You have the super heal. You have the smoke screen if you have that, which creates your own cover for you, right? There's different things you have at your disposal, but I feel a lot of people take it for granted and piss it away so incredibly quickly. And then when they die or get first blooded, they sit there and scratch their head like, well, what the hell? This is not my fault. It's one of those things they just don't quite fully grasp, is what I'm trying to say. So I think the ship definitely has a high skill ceiling, is what I'm trying to say. And again, this whole line in particular, I would say especially after the Fiji, really changes by 90 degrees about the skill level that's really required to make these ships work, okay? Here's a great clip of some hot, steamy Mino on Mino action. Again, showing you if you do not angle and you do not respect the guns of the Mino in a light cruiser, my short fused AP is absolutely churning through the enemy Mino, and that's what will happen. If you think I gotta use all my guns all the time, my effective DPM is crucial, I can't afford just to use 2 guns, well, you get 9 citadels on you and you pretty much lose all your HP. And the second he's like, well, it's my last hurrah, I gotta use all my DPM, he just goes flat broadside to me again. I win that engagement. We're all intents and purposes, I think that guy had the advantage of the HP and the positional coming in. But again, because my kiting angles are a little bit better and you can get that third turret to bear a little bit further in the back, so I'm not just subjugated to the rear 2 turrets to do all my damage, I can outthink him, and I was able to actually outtrade him as well, and eventually inevitably win the engagement. Like that engagement right there, if I lose that engagement, there's a really good chance that we actually lose the game. But we're able to outplay him, use our smarts, angle a bit, and have good target selection because I'm familiar, or not target selection, but aiming. We're familiar with how the Minotaur plays, and we're able to basically win the engagement and potentially win the game for a team. And again, shout out to our Kunming, who is playing the objectives and by capping, which is, again, a critical part of this game. So all in all, basically to sum up, because I know I got sidetracked there with that engagement, the Minotaur is an awesome ship. She does take a lot of game knowledge to work. And again, having a little bit of help via divisions or teammates isn't a bad idea either to really make her shine. Again, the meta is not very forgiving towards light cruisers at all. Light cruisers are definitely the whipping bitch of this game, in my opinion. I know a lot of people for years said DDs were, and I agree. I think DDs were for the longest time, and to some degree still are. But man, with all the plane spotting and subs and all this, like, just keeping light cruisers that rely so heavily on stealth detected pretty much counters them so hard. Unless you have a ship like the Colbert that has that insane speed boost and handling and can just wiggle waggle zigzag all over the map, it's really hard to play these light cruisers nowadays. And I think that's why a lot of players gravitate towards the Smoke Mino, because it kind of null and voids that and allows you to play through concealment that you can now fabricate, and you're not reliant on the map you spawn in at, right? But yeah, the DPM, the torpedoes, the team utility, the carry potential, the Mino has it all, guys. But I really do think the Minotaur gets, like, we say this about a lot of cruisers, and again, across the board this is true, but man, the fewer and fewer ships left in game, the Minotaur's strength really starts to shine. The only problem with the Minotaur when you get to these last fewer ships is if you're fighting ships like the Marseille, the Castilla, the Napoli, ships that have these bigger guns that can just absolutely nuke you through your nose, it pretty much hard counters you unless you have heals ready to go when you fight your engagements. And only if you're fighting them 1v1. Your torp angles, you're still going to have to show a fair amount of broadside to land them. But again, the single launch ability is going to allow you to sway those engagements to your favor and basically almost guarantee you landing torpedoes on target. So anyways, guys, this was an E-ranked game. 280,000 damage in our Mino is always nice to see. What a game this was. It really showed you what the Minotaur is capable of doing in the right hands. But again, guys, it comes down to the map, mini-map awareness, and positioning. I cannot stress that enough. Cruiser gameplay guide comes down to the positioning. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning into this lengthy review of the HMS Minotaur. Have a good rest of your day, guys, and peace out.